What's up guys, War History Geek here, and welcome back to another item highlight video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the German S98/05. Now these were used extensively in the first half of the 20th century. The S in S98/05 simply stands for Seitengewehr 98, which is sidearm. And it's also commonly referred to as the butcher's blade bayonet, which we'll see why momentarily. These were designed for use with the Gewehr 98 to be issued to engineers and pioneers. The blade length comes to a total of 20.9 inches or 530 millimeters. And the overall length comes to 25.6 inches or 650 millimeters. These were first issued in late 1905 to replace the 98/02, as I said before, for engineers and pioneer troops, as it was deemed too long and heavy for the intended use. Now, when these first went into production, there were two specific types. You had the plain back, which was the S98/05 designated OS, standing for Ohne Säge, which is without saw, and the sawback version, designated the S98/05 MS, or mit Säge, which is with saw. And the sawbacks are extraordinarily rare, as there were approximately only 6% of all the bayonets produced of this type that were fitted with the saws. Now, the first type of scabbard, which as you can tell I do not have here, was fully leather with a steel throat up at the top and then other steel components. At the beginning of World War I, they found that these bayonets had a problem with the K98s, and they're the carabiner, which had the shorter barrels than the Gewehr 98s, and that the wooden handles on the back here were getting scorched by the flash coming out of the end of the barrel. So what they did to resolve that problem was they simplified the design and they put this steel flash guard on the back of the grips to protect them from scorch damage and so forth. Now, this resulted in new designations, being the S98/05 NA, standing for Neuer Art, or new type, and the S98/05 AA, or Alter Art, standing for old type. And then, of course, you also had double designations, such as the S98/05 AAOS. So, for instance, AA without saw, or AA with saw. And then you had, by 1915, right at the beginning of World War I, the scabbards were replaced with steel scabbards like you see on my example here, quite simply for durability and simplification of production. Well, 1917, they ended the sawback production, and there's a lot of different debated things here. One was to simplify the production process and so forth. But based on my research, I found that they ended the sawback production due to the mistreatment of German prisoners that were captured with these, because these were usually, officers' bayonets. Axis powers were able to use these sawbacks in a lot of propaganda to say how gruesome the Germans were. So usually, if a German soldier was captured with one of the sawback versions of this, they would be heavily mistreated by their captors. So they ended the production of the sawback in 1917 to combat that. By the end of World War I, the 84/98 bayonet took over as the main issued bayonet for German armed forces, and the production of these 98/05s was stopped. Now, following World War I, large numbers of these were shipped to foreign countries for use in their armed forces. And then in post-war Germany, the 98/05s were given as marks of distinction or honors, more so than actual tools/weapons. And because of the Treaty of Versailles and the restrictions on how many weapons and firearms that they could have in their armed forces, any blade that was issued or continued to be used after 1920 was stamped 1920 somewhere here on the hilt, which mine does not have. And that was to show the approval that they were allowed to be used. By 1923, they were completely removed from service. And they stopped being used for that certain amount of time, and then when World War II broke out, they still had some stores of these left. So in World War II, some 98/05s were refurbished and then issued to Luftwaffe ground troops. However, very few of these are recorded, and those you'll see with refurbishments, you'll find new stamps on them, and you'll find that all the metal had been blued, including the blade, the crossguard, and all the other metal parts had been blued, just like how all the other German blades were at that time. And then, so you have two options of what yours could possibly be. Now, the first one is a vet bringback from the First World War. And the second option is that in the 1960s or 70s, I believe, there were a lot of these still left in stores, and they were imported to the United States with the remaining stocks of the Gewehr 98s, which is what I believe I have here. And I'll explain why momentarily. So now that I've gotten all the details out of the way, we can take a look at my example. So I'm very fortunate to have this at my local antique mall. I usually get some pretty good deals, but the one day I walked into one of the usual cases I visit, and I saw this in there, and I believe he wanted like $180, $200 for it, which was already an excellent deal. These usually go for anywhere from $250 to $350. So I could have walked away with a good deal there. But the antique mall's policy is any item listed over $100, you're able to contact the seller and see if they're willing to go down on price. So I had just gotten in there. I figured I have time to walk around. So I went ahead and I asked them to call the dealer, and I made an offer of $165, and they accepted it. So I managed to get this excellent World War I German bayonet for only $165. So excellent deal there. But anyway, taking a look here first at the blade itself, you can see why it was referred to as the butcher blade. As you can see, rather than the normal bayonet, it comes up here and widens out for tool purposes, whether you were chopping with it or if you were going to be digging with it or anything like that. And it just made it more sturdy and less prone to breaking. Zooming in here a little bit, you'll see the stamp there, Amberg, and the production stamp right there. Flipping it over, you'll see the maker, F. Herder Zollingen, and the key logo, and you can see they're in excellent condition. Very little wear there, except for on the crown here. Just absolutely excellent there. Moving on, if you look down here, you'll be able to see the German approval stamps. So very nice there. And the wood grips, of course. Now, these were scorned, much like the World War II ones. And sadly, there is a little bit of damage to the grips here, but nothing that I'm too concerned with. It's over 100 years old. I mean, you can't really ask for much better than this. And as you can see here, the guard that I was referring to earlier to protect the wooden grips. There we go. Yeah, the guard there to protect the wooden grips. Just an excellent piece here. And then moving down the blade, you can see it was sharpened. But again, with the price I got it at, I mean, you couldn't really ask for much better. So, excellent purchase there. So, setting the blade off to the side, taking a look at the sheath and frog here, you can see that if it'll focus for me. You can see 192 being one of the production numbers. And, oh, actually, I almost forgot before we move on here. Sorry about that. We have the approval stamps and the year of production for my bayonet being 1915, making it a very early production run during the First World War. So, very happy to get that. Going back to what I was discussing, we have that production stamp there. And that's really all for the steel sheath. As you can tell, it does have a little bit of damage to it. But again, nothing that I'm too bothered by. I'm just absolutely happy to have this in my collection. Zooming in here on the end of the steel sheath, you can see another production number there. And I don't think there's any more approval stamps down there. And then an interesting part here is you'll see a 1938 dated frog, which makes this a World War II German-produced bayonet frog. So why this is on here, I kind of hinted at this beforehand. There's two options. It's a World War I vet bringback, and that would, you would think, have the original World War I frog or no frog at all. But the more likely option here, in my opinion, is that this was part of the imported batch in the 1960s and 70s, and they just threw a World War II frog on the blade that they had in stock. The other option, which is definitely a possibility, is some dealer, after the fact, put the frog on. However, based on the, like the dryness of the frog and how difficult it would have been to be able to fit an original frog over the sheath, my guess is it was probably put on decades ago when it was imported. So, that is about all that we have for this item here. Like I said, I got an excellent deal on it, so I'm just absolutely over the moon to be able to get this into my collection. To be honest with you, I didn't even know these really existed until I saw it, and then I did a little bit of research on the spot there. But just an excellent piece. It really gives you a picture into what combat was like in World War I. Just absolutely brutal trench warfare, and a very early piece. I mean, like, you see normal bayonets all the time, but not very often do you see something like this. So, as I've said several times now, extremely happy to have this in my collection. And yeah, that's about all I have. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, and when you're in that area, hit the subscription button and notification bell. I have plenty of other videos coming in the near future, very similar to this, so stay tuned for that. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.